So what we're attempting now, imagine that we're all face to face in Seattle and we were all in breakout rooms doing these sessions. And now we're wandering through the halls and we're coming back into the main room at the foundation. If you haven't been there, it's a glorious event center. And then we're just giving a chance for people to like raise their hand and talk about, share a highlight of what came out of their session. So everybody gets a little bit of flavor and kind of cross-pollination. And of course we're virtual, so that's going to be kind of hard to do, but we have a solution. What we have done is the tech moderators and the Miro facilitators have taken the top level idea that came out. Hopefully you were able to land on one thing, and they are now, as we speak, adding it to something called Slido. Ideas, which will allow, and then at the right time, we're going to share the desktop and share that link. And you'll be able to actually go through all of the top line ideas from the 9 different sessions, and you'll be able to reply to them, build on the idea, ask a question, share something that might be relevant, just top of mind. And you'll also get a chance, it's just like a Facebook like button, a like thumb, you'll be able to, give it a thumbs up. And vote for no more than 2 ideas that really resonate with you. And again, it's not like, these are final fleshed out ideas. These are just top line beginning concepts of a brainstorm. And so Allison or Brittany, is there anything that I've forgotten in the instructions? I think I'm going to pass it over to you to give the technical instructions.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I did want to just mention that I did post the link in the chat. So do click on that link and it should bring you to this page where you can scroll down and start to upvote. Looks like we've already got some people upvoting, which is awesome. You'll notice as you go, so we've got the name of the session as the title. And then you can see some of those ideas. Use these buttons here to upvote. You can also reply by clicking the reply button. But do scroll down, read through some of those ideas, leave comments, and upvote again those favorite ideas.
Great, so we'll give folks a chance to do that. I'm just going to click on the link so I can see it. And while we're kind of voting and talking, I'm just going to call on a couple of folks, and I know that they were prepared to do this. So Payush or Sarah, what was the top idea that came out of your session?
So we were talking about, kind of how do we make the social norm of giving and giving thoughtfully and strategically more visible. We landed on workplaces and creating kind of structures for employees to start communities, whether they be giving circles or just discussions or Slack channels or whatever, informal or quasi-formal. So that's what's represented here, a little bit cryptically, I think, as formalized structured sharing is what it says in the Slido there.
That's great. Cheryl Dorsey, if I may put you on the spot, what was the top idea that came out of your session?
Well, our group, which was really focused on racial equity and philanthropy, sort of how do you provide more funding to proximate leaders of color, it was hard to whittle down to one idea, Beth. And it was really sort of an evolving conversation that started with the group identifying drivers at the personal, organizational, and systemic levels that prevent leaders of color from getting funding. So then the group then pivoted to a number of really thoughtful ideas, from structural to getting leaders of color more proximate to funding sources, to thinking about measurement and evaluation in new ways that don't weaponize data against leaders of color and proximate leaders, all the way to greater accountability in philanthropic spaces. Fundamentally, though, I think the powerful point was ultimately that we all have to drive a conversation about who needs to change. Is it the leaders of color, or is it the philanthropic leaders? And ultimately, the philanthropic leaders who have to change. And I think that was a really powerful point on which our group ended our conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl, for summarizing that. And I will remind folks that there will be notes coming out of these sessions as well, and recordings of the presentations. And actually, something you said kind of relates to something that came up in our session. I'm going to ask Allison Fine if you wanted to share about the community-driven algorithm.
So we did speed
Idea.
dating of AI for philanthropy based on the report that Beth and I released last summer called AI for Giving. And our group was magnificent. No question, the very best group there is here, even though I don't know the other groups, but ours was definitely the best. And the theme that we ended up focusing on was to ensure that we have community-driven co-creation, co-investment, and co-owned data and algorithms to ultimately utilize AI to shift and redistribute wealth and power. And we spent a lot of time really focused on the need to ensure that algorithms aren't owned by one nerd or one company, but are really a source of equity and community power.
Great, thanks, Allison. And Jasmine, I know you also did a group with Donors Choose. If I haven't fried my brain, I don't remember who it is. Would you like to give us a headline briefly about what
Sure.
bubbled up in your group?
So we focused on what are ways to engage donors in local or hyper-local giving in ways that are equitable, given that sometimes those are really a juxtaposed way of thinking about giving, both like in your neighborhood and equitably spread across space. And the place that we landed is that there's two ends of that are really important. The external space is maybe shifting what we mean by hyperlocal and really pushing the boundaries of that in lots of different ways. And then the internal space of that is growing capacity for nonprofits, so that all organizations can participate in this landscape of hyperlocal giving in ways that are equitable and that feel like you can access even these small or POC-led organizations, those kinds of things. Great, thank you for that. And here's a little tip: when you have lots of pages to zoom through and you're going on memory of who is a group leader, and I'm hoping somebody who wants to go next, who is a group leader and share something in the report. If you can also volunteer and put that in the chat. I'm seeing.
Beth, I'm happy to go for the DAF, our advice fund group.
Sure, thank you. Great, go.
Sure, great. So we had a really engaged group. We were looking at donor advised funds, and our big question was, let's assume that donor advised funds are here to stay. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. They're increasing in popularity. So what do we want to see? How do we want them to evolve so that they can serve the sector most effectively? And our biggest takeaway was, and there's a lot within even just this first, like now what we want to focus on, but really trying to improve communications between nonprofits and donors with DAF sponsors as that intermediary. And this can also include improving technology, speeding up the like grant disbursements, accessibility of nonprofits to donors, and also include a lot of donor education to help donors really find where the most opportunity lies. We also had, other ideas about how can we develop more collaborative funding opportunities that center around nonprofits instead of donors, leveraging this vehicle. And lastly, sort of looking at what the regulatory infrastructure is for DAFs and how can we revisit that and sort of reevaluate what the incentives are for DAF sponsors and how we would want to structure DAFs to better serve the sector.
Great, thanks, Erin. And I'm going to ask Woodrow, because she's right below you in the Hollywood squares. Woodrow, do you want to unmute and just share real briefly what bubbled up in your group?
Sure, happy to. So it was interesting because we talked about a lot of different themes right from the beginning. John Hallward had us orienting around this idea of we need people to be motivated to give, they need to have opportunities, and they need to be triggered to give. And so we started thinking in those themes, but it got pretty broad from there. And so we tried to prioritize a little bit on what is most accessible. One of the things that came out right away is we need to be able to provide our nonprofit sector with more understanding and best practice. And that's something that we can action immediately. From there, we ended up talking about how do we preserve these communities of givers and turn that into ongoing practice of philanthropy and generosity over time. And that includes both increasing the volume as well as the impact of their giving. And in between, how are we asking them? When are we asking them? What are the mechanisms for that?
Great. Jeannie, would you
Yeah,
like
real
to
quick.
share?
Yeah, real quickly,
Real
we had, just this idea, we had a great conversation about giving to women's and girls causes, and then centering around this idea of moving women and children from being kind of recipients and survivors to this idea of leading, becoming leaders who can help break the cycle and systems that have created gender inequities.
That's awesome. So I know there's two other groups we want to hear from, unless I miscounted. Please let me know in the chat if I've left anybody out, because there's been a lot through my brain today. So I'm going to go to Akhtar.
Thanks, Beth. Our group was focused on viral fundraising, and we kind of looked at, even in the morning when in the keynote plenary presentation, we talked a lot about digital and technology using for viral fundraising, and what we as a group, came down to, especially if we wanted to extend access equitably to nonprofit organizations on using technology and digital to raise money, we narrowed it down to capacity building being the key, especially for smaller nonprofit organizations, so they are positioned to be able to take advantage. And then how are we evolving the technology so that it becomes much more accessible?
Great, thanks, Akhtar. And I hope, this should be last, but please, if
yes.
I messed up, please put it in the chat if I forgot somebody. Ben.
Great. So we spoke about the ways in which norms and narratives surrounding giving were really entangled, and tried to think about the power of those norms and narratives. And so we had we ended up talking about three major ones surrounding giving norms and narratives around equity, around reciprocity, and around small or local giving. I think eventually we're trying to figure out if any of them sort of should have priority and fostered others. I think we didn't come to a full consensus on that, but ended up thinking that equity contained a whole bunch of narratives within it and norms within it that could potentially kind of seed others, though there was, I think, some really interesting discussion and debate on that.
Great, thanks, Ben. Is there any other group leader presenter who I missed while paging through 5 pages of Zoom pages? Please, great, okay, nailed it. All right, so in terms of nailing it, if we could just give a round of clapping to all the presenters, because and to the Miro facilitators and to all the participants, because we asked you to engage in a slightly different way online, and that's always a little bit anxiety producing, I could say, from firsthand experience. But hopefully we all learned a lot. I mean, our session was amazing. And in terms of wrapping up, there is just a couple of things. Of course, can you guess what I'm going to ask you all to do? Survey time. And it's really super easy, and it would be really super easy for you to hang on for another 1 or 2 minutes. And I think we might even have some survey music that somebody's going to drop in to fill it out. It's over under the feedback tab, and it's being dropped, I believe, in the chat. We really want your feedback. We really want the data so we can improve the next couple of events. So Here we go. Thank you